Without further delay, I would like to introduce back in the stage Charles Hoskinson, the CEO of Input Output, who will give the keynote talk, of course, on the topic of the age of Voltaire. Charles, please come on stage.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here. You know, 6 years ago, we started a journey together here with the University of Edinburgh. We set up a lab. It was a very small lab. It was just $250,000, although at the time that was a lot of money to us. In fact, everybody flew coach. You know, we all stayed in a really cheap hotel. We doubled up because we didn't have enough money. But it was a major commitment because when we looked at Cardano and what Cardano would require, which at the time was just a dream, it required deep research, an unreasonable amount of research. It required us to think about new ways of doing consensus. It required us to invent an entirely new accounting model, to write our own programming languages, or at least variations of ones that existed before. It required us to think about governance, interoperability. It required us to build basically an army of scientists, which in itself would be a huge achievement, but then it required us to actually write the code to make it run. And it had to be reliable code, and it had to work on many different computers, Windows computers and Mac computers and Linux servers and these types of things, and that was a long journey. It was a lot of work, and we didn't actually have the right engineers. We didn't actually have all the right ideas at the time. That's why there are things like Byron Reboot. Anybody remember those good days? That's why we made some mistakes along the way, and the protocol is like a piece of archaeology. When you look at it, you can see everything we did right, and you can see everything we fucked up on. And believe me, I'd love to get a do-over on a lot of stuff in life. But you don't get that. You just have to move forward. You have to push forward. And what is so special about these 6 years has been our ability to succeed despite the fact that we fucked up. Our ability to persevere in every market condition. We started Cardano in a downturn. Bitcoin was at $250. Remember those days? It was down from $1,200. And crypto was not looking so good. It was stagnant for 18.5 months. No one particularly paid much attention to us. They said, Mt. Gox collapsed, Silk Road collapsed. This crypto thing's a fad whose time has come and gone. We launched Cardano in 2017, the height of a bull market. It grew like a weed, and then it went from $1.48 to 2 cents. You guys remember that? I sure as hell do. Bitcoin went from $20,000 to $4,000, and the industry said, it was a fad, you know, whatever. It was tough. Bull markets and bear markets, a lot of stuff in between. We went through a pandemic together. Completely changed the way that we did business. We used to have all these workshops and events, and I would be the odd man out, so I'd travel. Went to over 50 countries in just 3 years. I've been to 72 now in the last 8 years. Pretty long road. But usually when people were getting a bit disgruntled or tired, what I would do is I would say, hey, I'm going to fly to your country. Where you at? South Korea? No problem. Japan? Sure, why not? It's just 14 hours away plus jet lag. I can go there, we can spend some time together. Because it allowed us to build some camaraderie. What COVID took from us was the closeness, the human touch, the connection. We lost all that. We were isolated and siloed for 2 years, and a lot of uncertainty flew through. Meanwhile, the markets were bloody, and it wasn't even clear where crypto was going, what was going to happen. Did we give up? No, we persevered. We pushed through. We got Shelley out. That was a great accomplishment. It was so much work, Shelley. I mean, it's one thing to say you're going to do proof of stake. It's another thing to do proof of stake. And we did. It's pretty special. And we did it in the best way this industry's seen. They got real spoiled from it when Ethereum launched, and they have custodial staking, non-liquid staking, all these things, and people over there say, wait, isn't that how you have to do it? And we said, no, actually you don't. There's no way it can be secure. Well, we kind of did that in 2020, excuse me. It's 2022. We launched smart contracts God, that was hard because it's a completely different way of doing smart contracts. It's the right way of doing smart contracts. The problem with doing things the right way, it's like telling kids to eat your broccoli. They sometimes don't like it. Now, we tried with Marlowe and other things, put some cheese on it and other things. Still broccoli, though. Still tasty, right? Yeah, okay. There was a famous US president who would never eat broccoli. We shall remain nameless. So, we got Plutus out. We did all of that. But there's still some more behind me, these creepy deep fakes. We're technically here, although we've been working here and here quite a lot. What you guys don't see is at I/O is we're just one of 15 companies working on Cardano. And over 700 people in our company, other companies, and other places work together in some way or fashion to talk about not only these guys, but these people. By the way, I really regret this one. I shouldn't have named him Gauguin. You know what this should have been called? Hopper, after Grace Hopper. I see, talk about fuck-ups and mistakes. I like Gauguin. He's a good guy, but there's not enough women here. So we worked on Basho and we worked on Voltaire, and the topic today is to talk a bit about Voltaire and a bit about Basho and where we're going in 2023, and then I have a special surprise at the end, and we'll talk about that. So I'm going to go out of order a little bit, and we're going to talk about Voltaire first, because that's the title of the talk, Age of Voltaire. Does anybody have any clue of what is good governance? What the heck does that mean? Well, that's a question I asked, and a lot of our people asked, scientists, business people, legal people, and the closest approximation we could come up with was kind of 3 different categories. And everybody liked the whiteboard video, so I figured, let's do another whiteboard video, huh? Blast from the past. God, that is creepy. So first off, we have this idea of representation. And we have this idea of consent. The bedrock of all governance really stems from this first property. If something bad happens, were you consented? Did you approve it? Were you involved in it? Or did it just happen to you? The difference between democracies and dictatorships, at the end of the rainbow, is when bad things happen in a dictatorship, there's always the king to blame. In a democracy, well, you put that guy in. What the hell did you do? You made the decision, right? Representation. And there's many different ways of doing representation. There's direct representation, where you actually voted on it. There's delegated authority, where you give someone else your authority. There's elected officials that you can hire and yell at, and they can kind of become symbols of all your rage and anger. There's even political parties. Go figure. We've been doing this now for thousands of years, and it's nice that Greeks work on this project because they're the ones who invented it, and when they figure it out, they should get credit for it. So first we need representation and consent. So we released a SIP today, SIP 1694. Does anybody know what that number is? What's so special about that number? Exactly right. That was his birth date. We had to name it. We had to number it. It was a 4 number. And I said, all right, well, Voltaire's birth date. And what this does is it reuses a lot of the mechanics that we have for staking. So we have things like SPOs. We have things like delegation. We have stuff on chain, for example, the update system. Twitter reminds me of that often. We have lots of cool stuff. And the problem is that right now we don't get to use a lot of that cool stuff with voting. We get to use it with staking. 74% of our network is delegated. We have thousands of stake pool operators. It's a very robust, resilient command and control. We succeeded in the Shelley age. We're among the most decentralized of decentralized in terms of command and control. So what we did is we tried to take those mechanics and reuse them for on-chain representation. So we introduced this concept of a DREP, a delegated representative. Now, it's nothing new if you've been following Catalyst, because this is a concept we started there. We like telegraphing things, incubating things. We like giving people some options. And what's so cool is that people, like they do a SPO, registering an SPO, can register as a DREP, people can delegate to them, and then they can vote on-chain updates. All right, that's something interesting. Now, In practice, this is going to be a minefield of madness. You guys have to approve it. You have to talk about it. So this is just the beginning. SIP 1694 is open for debate, which means that now that it's on GitHub, thousands and thousands of people are going to have very strong opinions on everything, from whether we should have used a period or that's a run-on sentence to we vehemently disagree with everything you said here. And that's a good thing. The people who participate in that process, we're going to rally them up, form a posse, and then we're going to drag them into a workshop in Q1. Talk it out and get this SIP ratified as quickly as we can. We know how to build what we wrote. If there are radical changes, it might take a little longer, but we're going to get there together because you all deserve a government, and we deserve to have every person who holds Ada have a voice because they've come along with us. Now, are we done? No. Number two, you need some rules. Usually we call this a constitution. Okay? So, constitutions, rules, whatever you want to call them, end user license agreements, these are the rights that protect you from mob rule. Why is it that 51% can't vote, take all your money? Well, because you have property rights. Where do they come from? Some people say from God. And, well, constitutions take God's will. It's the government's interpretation of that. Your natural rights, your freedom of religion, your freedom of speech, all these freedoms, these negative rights that prevent people from coming at you. Well, rules. So why is it that for a protocol as complex and interesting as Cardano that we don't have some basic rules, some basic notions? For example, the vast majority of people who signed up for Cardano tend to believe that maybe there should never be more than 45 billion ADA. Seems like a pretty good rule. Same for Bitcoin. If you look at Bitcoin, you think of Bitcoin. Should never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. There's an algorithm. Technically, they could change it. But would people still use it if it has a variable monetary policy? Would people still believe the things that they believe about it? Would people still compare it favorably to central banks who are deflationary monetary policy people? Probably not. So we probably need to write down some rules and come up with a constitution together, get it ratified. And what's really exciting is this is both a computer science exercise as much as it is a governance exercise, because the difference in computer science land is that constitutions can be machine understandable. What the heck does that mean? Well, we have these specifications for Cardano, we have these blueprints for Cardano, we have these notions of the design of Cardano, of what Cardano is and what Cardano isn't. Ledger specs, consensus specs, formal specifications for languages, these types of things. And if they're written in just the right way, you actually, a computer can understand them to the extent that you could link an update system to it. So the first generation is getting the human beings to agree their intent on a constitution. But as the days turn to weeks, turns to months, turns to years, the long-term aspiration is to take that intent and actually make it understandable by protocols, which means our entire on-chain governance system, these two things, basically is one gigantic gnomic machine. How about that? Something I've been wanting to do for a really long time. So next year, we're going to do the same thing we did with SIP 1694. We're going to write down, I'll call it the SIP Constitution, for lack of a better term, some ideas, talk to you guys and see if you like them, don't like them, hate us, and then we'll just keep going and workshop it out until eventually we get to something that people can live for. Now, here's the interesting thing. Once you have a voting system, you can vote to ratify a constitution. How about that? And once you have a constitution, you can take that text and you can version it, and then you can hash it, and then you can embed it in every transaction. When people sign that transaction, it's kind of like signing an end-user license agreement, right? It's pretty simple. So that's one way you can start talking about decentralized constitutions, decentralized governance. No clue where it's going to go, but that's the point. And that's why we chose Voltaire, because he wrote a lot of essays throughout his life. He was very critical about democracy for a variety of reasons, but at the same time was somewhat seduced by it. A very paradoxical person. And similarly, when you think about the nature of direct democracy versus representative democracy versus constitutional democracies, these types of things, you do have to ponder what's required to make all these things work. And that's what we're living together. And what's cool is we do it as one. Now, Number 3, you need institutions. Now, the problem with decentralization is actually, at the end of the rainbow, decentralization tries to kill institutions. It goes around, it says, why the hell do we have all these middlemen? And get rid of them, you know? Everybody's a kingdom. Everybody's self-sovereign. Well, institutions are things we construct to deal with complexity. Okay? Not many people floating around are domain experts on how to build nuclear power plants. Not many people floating around are really good at brain surgery. Not many people floating around are cryptographers or game theorists. They certainly exist, but you notice something is that they tend to build institutions, formal societies. They tend to build all kinds of professional connections, journals, peer review process, licensures, certifications, credentials. Why? Because what they're doing is they're trying to say there's a standard, and we want people to measure up to that standard and be good custodians of the collective knowledge of the institution and have the ability to not only contribute to it, but pass it on from generation to generation. You cannot have good governance if you don't have good institutions. You can have a great constitution, but if nobody truly understands what freedom of speech or religion or any of these things are, who's there to interpret it? What is a constitution without a Supreme Court? What is a constitution without legal scholars? You can have great democracy. The problem is, how do they make decisions? You can go to every ADA holder. Are they domain experts on game theory and programming languages and these types of things? They'll say, well, I want it better, faster, and cheaper. Okay, well, there's 26 ways to do that. Which one would you like to choose from? And they say, what trade-offs do we have? Well, it'd be nice if we had somebody around to help us. If we look to our own governments, the United States, we have the Congressional Budget Office, the Government Accountability Office, we have think tanks, we have all kinds of things, and they exist to serve from the perspective that they analyze complex things and they write down reports and they say, well, here are the pros and cons in our view of it. Some are partisan and they have a particular political slant, some are neutral. Institutions are best when they're given consent informed from and by the people. So we thought a lot about what are the institutions that Cardano requires in order for Cardano to be successful as a protocol. And we came up with this idea of batting it back to you guys. We call it the Cardano Members-Based Organization. Yay. By the way, it's a terrible name, and the first order of business for you guys to do is to rename it. So we created the MBO as a filtering point to bring together all the divergent interests. We started this conversation early this year. We engaged with many different open source programs and projects. We talked to the Linux Foundation. We talked to the Apache people. We talked to all kinds. We hired some open source experts, as did the Cardano Foundation. And the conclusion was, let's set something up where the members own, operate it, run it. They staff the committees and make it look like a good open source program. You know, technical steering committee, governance steering committee, all these things, and let them all join. Anyone who holds ADA is welcome to join. Anyone building on Cardano is welcome to join. It's yours as much as it is mine or anyone else. And the point here is to kind of filter all the complexity of the day-to-day of Cardano and help us converge to things like roadmaps, help us shepherd the SIP process, help us sort out all the complexity of things. Because at the end of the day, you get the vote, but wouldn't it be nice if you had a nice place that tells you a bit about what you're voting on, the choices you're making? You see, there's no stewards anymore. That's the thing. I/O is not running the show, guys. We haven't been for a long time. Foundation clearly isn't. We're not. So what does this mean? It means that you guys have to run it, and that's the trust we have to put into you. So all I can do is help you build the institutions, help you write the Constitution, and give some guidance on how I feel it's best to give you a voice. But at the end of the day, the voice is yours, and yours alone. So what 2023 is all about are these three things when we talk about Voltaire. A lot of code and a lot of design to, for the first time ever, have a really nice scalable voting system with high participation. Everybody who holds ADA in some way is connected to it. Getting a constitution done and getting those rules down so that everybody who uses Cardano has absolute certainty that there's some things that are fixed in stone and they're not going to be changed unless there's an overwhelming need to do so and a clear process for that. And identifying the clear institutions that are needed. An MBO is a filtering and aggregation point. It's a place for everybody to come together, ourselves included, and talk to each other, because we desperately need that. But it's not the only institution that we need. If you've been paying attention, you'll notice that I've been slowly and sneakily creating centers around the academic world and doing other things, like the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics, or here with the Edinburgh Decentralization Index and these things. And in a way, these are institutions, and they do specific things. In the case of EDI, the people here need to understand if the choices that they make are centralizing or decentralizing Cardano. And they need an objective, neutral body to tell them that, because people can be biased. EDI is a North Star for you. If we want to have a machine-understandable constitution, we kind of have to get really good at writing proofs and formal languages down, and maybe, just maybe, there'd be a good center floating around that thinks about this type of stuff. They can do it for math, they can do it for that. You see? Some of these things will take years to fully materialize. Other things, they're already going to be useful next year. But this is the point of Voltaire, is to bring these components together. Now, we'll put millions of dollars down on the table and help set up this MBO and worry about a lot of the little details. But at the end of the rainbow, you have to sign up for it, or else it doesn't exist. And we go back to the drawing board, and we have to figure something else out. You see? That's the magic of open source, and that's the mentality that people have to have. You have to get rid of the fear of failure. You have to get rid of this notion that everybody has all the right answers. All we have are suggestions and ideas. And together, we're going to discover whether those were good ideas or bad ideas. Think of the audacity of Bitcoin itself. There's a guy, or a gal, or a team of people sitting in a room in 2008, 2007, however long it took to build. And they said, you know what? We're going to create this thing where people have to mine stuff with their laptops and their computers. And then if they mine those things, then eventually marketplaces will form, and people are going to like trade them for real money. And then eventually it'll get so powerful that like a cult will form around it, and tens of millions of people will live here and like just live off of these tokens that are mined. And like people make special microchips and everything for it. Pretty batshit crazy, right? Would you have believed this rant in 2007, 2008? No. You'd be like, oh, this guy's nuts. Get him out of here. And that's exactly what happened. Why? Not because of the founder, but because the founder was persuasive enough to get 2 people, then 3. Started with Hal Finney and Marty Malmy and all these others, and it grew. And think about the audacity of us as Cardano in 2017, saying to ourselves, oh yeah, we're going to just do all this peer-reviewed research and get all these universities on board that don't even know what the hell cryptocurrencies are, and hire like an army of scientists and convince them to spend the best moments of their professional lives writing papers in this area. And we're going to survive peer review and solve all these super hard computer science problems. And then all these people are just going to adopt it and just build it and so forth. Well, let's talk about the numbers. When we think about the numbers, well, 50,000 plus people actively participate in Catalyst. There's over 100 launch projects on Cardano, 1,200 more on the way. 3.6 million active wallets, 6 million native assets that have been issued. Yeah, that's a pretty big collective fucking delusion, if you ask me. It's pretty impressive. Bloody mad. But guess what? Madness and collection is a society. And that's what we've done. And that's what we're going to do next year. One way or the other, we're going to figure out how to open into the age of Voltaire. I mean, just look at this right here. They got the numbers up there. 729 authors on the GitHub, 56,000 commits, 32 active repos that we know of, 139, what are those, releases or prior releases for the code base, 3,200 stake pools, 53 million transactions, probably over $1 trillion of value when you sum up all of them, and 3.6 million wallets. That's a lot of ghosts. Pretty special, huh? So I'm willing to wager that some subset of this army, some subset of this network is going to look at the things that I've written on this whiteboard, as they did in 2017 when I did my first whiteboard video, and say, you know what? I think that's a pretty interesting idea. I like algorithmic law. Let's talk about that. You know what? I like voting. Let me look at SIP 1694. You know what? I like institutions. Let's talk about what makes a good one versus a bad one. What is good governance? What is bad governance? You know, here's the beautiful thing, is that we also get the open source nature of benefiting from the mistakes of the people in this industry. How many people here have heard of FTX? I read the bankruptcy filing. I read it. It's a great document because the guy who's now working in the liquidation used to be the fix guy for Enron. So they brought him in to kind of clean everything up and get through the whole bankruptcy process. And he wrote saying, never in his life, being the guy who fixed Enron and all these other things, has he seen such a profound lack of governance protocols, oversight, basic principles of corporate governance. Yet, all these brilliant people like Sequoia and others put hundreds of millions of dollars into this. All these people who should have known better got along with it. They fought for it. So it's a learning moment for all of us, that even if you think someone's brilliant or charismatic or amazing and wonderful and you like what they do or you don't like what they do or you think they're bison or the best in the world, which they are, at the end of the rainbow, you have to put in good governance and good institutions because they hold everyone accountable. That's the lesson of cryptocurrencies. Crypto didn't fail. No cryptocurrency went down. No blockchain suddenly stopped making blocks. No DEX did stop trading. Humans yet again proved that humans are really, really bad at being honest and being credible and moral. It's why blockchains exist. This is why this technology is so incredibly interesting. Because at the end of the day, Cardano is not about just serving its own needs. It's about changing the world. And when we say we want to be the financial operating system for the millions who don't have it, when we say we want to change everything, what we're actually saying is we just want the world to be more honest. We want the world to be more egalitarian. We want people to trust each other again. We want people to trust institutions again. It's not lost on me that a few years ago, if I was sitting at a bar next to a person who worked at the CDC in the United States, the opinion that most people would have is, wow, those are the incredible people. They wear the bunny suits and they go in and like fight Ebola and all that stuff. That's a hard job. Half of my country now looks at that person and says, that's the guy trying to inject my child with cancer juice. See how quickly an institution that can be so loved, admired, and treasured can fall from grace in the presence of the wrong information or mistakes made. No matter how strong the institution may be, no matter how credible it could be, how credentialed it could be, you're one or two bad decisions away, one or two black swan events away from it to come crumbling down. So the point is that can we replace institutions or augment institutions with some blockchain technology so it won't be evil, shouldn't be evil, don't be evil, turns into can't be evil, that we can trust them absolutely. That's why we started the Zero Knowledge Lab, amongst other reasons, because we wanted to have objects that explicitly did that. So that's Voltaire. It's deeply philosophical. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life, and we're going to get it done because it needs to get done, and I'm damn tired of our industry failing, and it's about time we can point to something and say, you know what, we did it the right way. We have to tend to our own gardens first. That was a lesson of Candide. So we have to fix Cardano's governance before we have the right to complain about any other person's governance. It's kind of funny. People always tell you how they're going to run the world, but they can't make their own bed. Well, let's make our own bed, huh? Let's fix some things. That's simple. And that's what we're going to do with Voltaire. We're going to teach this entire industry that we can be good people and we can bring some original, interesting things to the table. Now, if you're an academic, this is an all-you-can-eat buffet of papers. Whole bunch of new shit to publish. Private voting systems, the intersection of formal methods and algorithmic law. You get to co-author papers with all these poli-sci people, and they get to feel real smart because they're publishing with computer scientists. Holy shit. It's going to be fun, right? That's why we shored up Stanford and these other things. We got John Mitchell, we got all these people floating around. Andy Hall. It's going to be fun, you know, and we got some great people here in Edinburgh. And so that's Voltaire. And now let's talk about Basho. I'm going to assume somehow, some way, we're going to get Voltaire right because I'm crazy. Basho, ironically, is easier because that's just pure computer science. Who here likes better, faster, cheaper? Yay! Okay, you're functioning people and you're paying attention. Okay, so we made some really good decisions, some really good bets. For example, we realized that the account model that Ethereum is using is like horrible. Don't do that. We created a thing called extended UTXO. Now, we didn't come up with it. You know, UTXO was actually Satoshi's invention, and I'm sure there's some damn computer scientist in the 90s who said, well, actually, I invented that. Well, you know, good for you. Bitcoin came up with the distribution of it. And what we did is we added the E. Yeah, because E is amazing. Extended is great. And we attached this beautiful programming language to it, Plutus. And then we have all these DSLs that we could sit on top like Marlowe and other things. Now the power of extended UTXO is it's kind of like functional versus imperative, you know, the functional versus object-oriented, this universal debate of what is the perfect programming language. Well, if you live in a distributed system, it's a super, super bad idea to invite non-determinism. It's a super, super bad idea to rely on people having to just run the code and hope to God that it works the way that they intended. You need the ability locally to have some determinism and predictability about the stuff that you do. We've kind of learned this lesson again and again. It's why Ericsson created Erlang. It's why everybody who builds a massive concurrent system gets functional curious, like Google and Amazon and all these other people. They go down that road out of pain and hardship. They try really hard to make it work in the C world and really hard to make it work in the Java world. And grudgingly, angrily, they go and hire a formal methods guy and a functional programming guy. And they're like, all right, tell us the truth. You know, like, what do we need to do? Just the road they've gone down. We've seen it again and again, decade after decade. And it turns out that the EVM world is making this mistake again. They've chosen the exact same road to hell that all the other people have chosen, and they put it on steroids because they make everybody have to live that road to hell. They have to have a shared state amongst everybody. It's not a good idea. So if you're going to wander around and look for great ideas, as Basho did, and not get yourself killed, which was really hard to do during the Edo period, really easy to do, I should say, it's hard to survive, you should have a model that is stateless and functional, and a model that basically is great to parallelize. The problem is that this has to be built in layers. So last year and this year, when we did Alonzo and Vossel, what we were doing is introducing a completely new paradigm to people. Plutus and extended UTXO, but we didn't go down the road of how do we achieve parallelism and concurrency, because the reality is you require some additional stuff to achieve this. You need different data structures, you need a different consensus protocol, these types of things. So earlier this morning, you guys saw input endorsers. That is the first example where you can't actually do it the way we said with the EVM accounts model. You actually need something like extended UTXO. You actually also need something called Mithril, which pretty magical stuff. So we bet years ago by hiring really brilliant people like Phil Wadler and others and Moel Chakravarty, and there's just great people in this room and other rooms, and we gave them the freedom to go and build something, and boy, they took their time, they built it right. And they thought really deeply and carefully about it, much to the chagrin and consternation of some developers and angry people who said, no, we want these features now. Yeah, okay, they got them. It took a little while to get SIP 31 and 32 and 33, but we got them through, and there's still more to do. But this model is fundamentally sound. And we know that with things like input endorsers, it's going to scale. Now, we have to link what we do here to what we do over here with Voltaire. So how we've done engineering historically, and we've been accused of a bit of ivory towerism, is we go and do the peer review process and write papers, go through that, then we write formal specifications, and then we do a lot of engineering magic, and eventually works its way into the SIP process, and then community says, thank you very much, when's the hard fork date? That doesn't work if you want to be completely decentralized and you want to be an open source project. So at some point, you have to open up the tower, and the Wizard of Oz has to show himself, and you have to build it together with the community. So input endorsers is the first example of where that's going to happen, and it really links Basho and Voltaire together in a beautiful way. We wrote a paper showing the protocol and the design considerations and why we think it's a good idea. As we build the MBO and staff up the technical side and community members work with us to get these things done, that design is going to change. And IO didn't have a lot to say about that. Community is, because it's a big deal. Going from a sequential to a parallel system, changing the reward function, rewarding people in different ways, changing how stake pools work, these types of things is a mammoth overhaul of the system. And it requires us to work together to figure out. So we wrote some SIPs, and those SIPs are going to be concurrently worked on all next year with you guys, and we're going to get to a great design. And the community is going to work and build that design and get it done. Because once you've done it there, you can do it for anything. And it demonstrates to the world that Cardano truly is fully decentralized. It truly does have a complete open source ecosystem and community. You are reliant on no one but the self-interest of millions of people working together. So this is the perfect project and program to do that with, and it's of a sufficient complexity that it really does require a deep understanding of the guts of Cardano. You're talking about things like game theory. You're talking about things like new data structures. You're talking about things like the parallel chains paper that was written in 2018 and all the follow-ons from that. You're talking about trade-offs between finality, so transaction latency and throughput, and where should those be set. You're talking about tons of simulations and models and many good and interesting questions that have to be asked. And at the end of the day, what security assumptions are sacred and which ones can be scaled a little bit, up or down, left or right? It's an interesting question, and it's something we're all going to have to work on together for. So that's the first part of the Basho agenda, is this first concept that we've planned for the future by putting in Plutus and extended UTXO and these other things. It's given us the option to have the most scalable, fastest, best protocol ever conceived for the cryptocurrency space. But that option has to be called by you, the community. And we're going to do it together. We're going to figure it out together and do these things. Now, are we done? No, there's more to do. The problem is that if Cardano is successful, the blockchain is going to get real fat, like me. I've gained 45 pounds since I started this project, over 20 kilograms. How about that? And when it gets real fat, and there's lots going on, who has the ability to wait 3 days to download the whole blockchain? These types of things. I don't want to. Come on, let's be real about this. I mean, if we could make these things happen, PGP would have worked. Mithril. So this is another great innovation that actually came out of University of Edinburgh, and I think there was some University of Athens authors on that as well. Yeah, Pyros. So what was really magical about Mithril is it basically gives us a framework to start having a discussion about how do you interact with a blockchain, with a protocol on a cell phone or a browser, but have the same trust model, have the same assumptions of security as if you had the whole blockchain. You're going to kind of need that if your blockchain is terabytes, petabytes, yottabytes. It gets so big, so much is going on. What if you have a sidechain ecosystem and there's 35 sidechains? Are you going to download each blockchain, interact with all of those? No. You need a proof system. And what we're able to do, working exclusively this year, is go from just a concept in a paper, I think 14 or 15 development sprints, to something that you, the SPOs, are actually already testing and playing around with. It's one of the fastest development jobs we've ever done. And what's so cool is as Mithril evolves next year, not only is it going to work its way into the wallets, it's going to work its way into concepts like input endorsers. We can start talking about extending it, the concepts of it for data availability, and a lot of other areas that are going to become incredibly important in the 2023, 2024, 2025, and so forth. Now, are we done? No! We need some other technology as well. How many people here have heard of Hydra? Yeah, a few people. Do you know there's wallets integrating Hydra right now? Load Wallet is one. SundaySwap is also looking at it. And it's actually been another one of the amazing success stories of the Cardano ecosystem. We're real proud of it because it was a small team. It's an open source team. Multiple companies, Obsidian, ours, the foundation, are working together on it. And what they were able to do is go from a paper and a concept to code that people could take and start integrating into their products. And like all people who integrate code in their products, they complain. Rightfully so, because it doesn't do everything they want. And what we've been able to do is create a pipeline, a work stream, where those complaints turn into new features, into new code. So Hydra has evolved at a blistering pace, and what it's doing is it's kind of creating this turnkey infrastructure for dApp developers to use to be able to speed up their dApps and reduce chain bloat. So you have some things that say you don't need all of it. You have some things that say we don't need to do all of it on Cardano. You have a vision of the future, which is input endorsers. He's salivating because it's so good. You have some anti-competition here because, you know, Ethereum is never going to go to extended UTXO or Plutus. Bitcoin is too slow to adopt anything. So basically, it's like we can run the board. We'll be the fastest and the best forever. So we have a lot of built-in advantages here. But remember, in 2016, I wrote a paper called Why Cardano? And I said something. I said Cardano SL and Cardano CL. Now, we haven't forgotten about that. CL stood for either control or computation layer, depended on the side of the bed I woke up. We never standardized a nomenclature. But at the end of the day, what we were looking at is we were trying to come up with this idea of a multi-computational model. Because as good as the design decisions are in stock everyday Cardano, there's going to be somebody, right or wrong, who disagrees with them or can't agree with them because of the business logic they're encumbered with. That's fair. So you have two options. Option A is you can forget about it, say, sorry, you're just going to have to accept our way is the only way. We call that the Bitcoin approach. Or option B, you can build something to accommodate them. You can build something to bring those people into your ecosystem. So this is the concept of sidechains. And one of our most stoic teams, led by Dom and others, Dom's somewhere here, yeah, there he is, has had to somehow kind of come up with an idea of how are we going to do this? What are we going to do with this? And it's been a bit of a serpentine path. Not as bad as Neil Klobuchar with elliptic curve cryptography, but you're getting close to that. I mean, it's like, congratulations, you're really showing good spirit. The basic idea is that we spent a lot of time, effort, and money. This is my crude attempt at drawing a clock. A lot of time, effort, and money on building this really secure layer 1 Cardano, or a Boris and all this other stuff, extended UTXO, blah, blah, blah. Huge amount of effort. And that's a very solid root of trust that we have here. Well, once you have that, there's all these protocols that are really high speed and really capable and really optimized that can run at incredible throughput and have finality and all these other great properties, but they live in the permissioned world, meaning that they have fixed quorums or somebody has to go and instantiate them. So what if, and I'll use a different color for this. Why am I just using one color? The world works better when you have multiple colors. Okay, we'll use blue. Wouldn't it be super cool if you could build a bridge and you can have other networks that are almost kind of their own cryptocurrency? They have their own monetary policy. They have their own logic. They have their own computation model. So basically the scripts and all that other stuff can do whatever they want to do. And then if you have something like that and you build bridges in just the right way with just the right approach, you get the best of both worlds. You have a safe core that's never going to go down. You have a great root of trust. And then you can either experiment or you can optimize with these other systems. And by the way, these other systems can have huge ecosystems behind them. So the Mamba team and the sidechains team, they're all in one. They worked really hard at building a great proof of concept, a reference chain called Mamba, which is a BFT EVM chain. And they wrote a wonderful bridge to move value between the sidechain and the main network. And I believe it's very close to running on the testnet, or already is. Before the end of the year, most of these things are cleaned up. This is a great example of how one moves information, users, and value between two radically different systems. A pristine, beautiful system and the EVM. So that's great. But you know what? I want it all. I don't want just a few things. So how about we do this? How about we do Cosmos? So we have a project. Anybody heard of World Mobile? Yeah, a few people. They have a lot of very unique demands. Oh, Cardano's not connected to that. How about that? They're working on it. And wouldn't it be super cool if we built a sidechain for Fabric, Hyperledger Fabric? Now that one's going to take a little bit longer because there's some more heavy lifting to do. But what's so cool is this is the largest permissioned ecosystem in the entire world. Wouldn't it be so cool if their technology worked with our technology? And then suddenly Cardano now can route stuff this way, up this way, and then of course you can connect this to actual Ethereum. and they can go back through. Interoperability, the third generation. We keep saying it. You have to mean it. And meaning it means you have to build the infrastructure to get us there. So this is a great team, the sidechains team. We're real proud of them. And they've done some amazing work in figuring out how we're going to do this and instantiate the protocols. Now, there's going to be some differences on how these ecosystems have to plug together. And all throughout 2023, we're going to be thinking about that. But I'm a big believer in learn by doing. So that brings me to one more thing. Nice surprise. Something we've been working on for 4 years, and I think you guys will get pretty excited about this one. I know I am. It's like that scene in Austin Powers where he's trying to turn around the golf cart. He just can't get it done. There we go. Okay. So what if I told you that we've been working on another cryptocurrency? Yeah. And what if I told you you already have it? Well, are you going to get it? Ah, okay, you're interested. We have this thing called Midnight. Now, I was in Malta. I'll never forget it. We were in Malta, and I was eating at this lovely Sicilian restaurant. And I loved it so much I ate there 3 times. The third time I got food poisoning, but the second time it was great. And we were talking about the need for privacy. And we looked at Monero and Zcash and all these other things, and we're like, oh, fuck those guys. We could do so much better. And we're like, yeah. And I said, wouldn't it be cool if, we started working on this? And we said, yeah, okay. So we had been drinking a little bit. And so we said to ourselves, if it still makes sense when we're sober, we're going to do this. So then, later on, I went to Israel for Eurocrypt, and ironically, we were drunk there too. But we talked about it, and it still made sense. We said, we need to have a privacy coin. We need to have something that has privacy built at the core. But we had no idea what the hell that meant. So I said, okay, let's just hire a lot of really brilliant people. So we got a zero-knowledge expert, Markov, and all these other people. And we just started writing papers. We wrote Sonics and Kachina and all this other stuff. And we talked a lot about what would be required to have 3 properties, things that we think are human rights, which the blockchain space is not covering right now. And they're collectively called ACE. Freedom of association, freedom of commerce, and freedom of expression. Okay. So we said, okay, how do we achieve a system that gives us confidentiality, has privacy built right in its guts, right in its core, and gives us the ability to associate with the people we want to engage in commercial transactions that we think are legitimate, lawful, and to express ourselves. Why? Because our company operates in more than 60 countries. There's over 152 countries represented with Catalyst alone. Not every one of those countries, believe it or not, it's a surprise to me, has rule of law. Not every one of those countries protects its minorities. Some cases you run into ethnic cleansing. Some cases you run into brutal discrimination of people, especially LGBT. Some cases you have dictators and tyrants that control the narrative, and anybody who disagrees with them, they just, get tragically sick by falling out of a hospital window. Such countries shall remain nameless. And it's very important that we have tools that enable us to protect those people, to fight back against these types of things. And it's also very important that we understand that as cryptocurrencies become more nuanced by law and by necessity, it's very important that we keep the things that we do on them confidential to the general public. And if you disagree with that, how many people here are fully comfortable with their entire Amazon shopping history being public to everyone? Show of hands. No, don't even try. Or all of your Google web searches being fully public to everybody. Everything you've ever bought being fully. No, of course not. Why? Because you have an expectation, even though you trust maybe Google or don't trust, at least you trust their behavior, that if you get in a debate with them and say, God, for a guy that Googles dogs so much, you really ought to keep it down. You know they're not going to use these types of things, or at least you'd hope so. The problem is that those institutions, the trust we have in them is being violated on a daily basis. The issue is that those institutions are as corroded as the rest. Surveillance capitalism is a thing. There's great books about it. There's so many people who feel that they need to get some of their identity back, some of their power back. And one of the reasons why a lot of people sign up for cryptocurrencies is they mistakenly believe that cryptocurrencies have this capability. They mistakenly believe that cryptocurrencies will give them privacy and freedom of expression, association, and commerce. I did an interview this morning with a news agency, and we showed off Symphony of Blockchain. One of the magical things about that experience is we were able to start from January 3rd, 2009 and visually walk through every transaction that ever happened in Bitcoin's history. That doesn't really sound like you have a lot of transactional privacy there, right? If I can build a VR experience to do that, anyone else can. So we constructed Midnight to basically bring this back, but we wanted to go above and beyond just privacy. We wanted to explore new boundaries and concepts, confidentiality. So this idea that it's private to the public, but you can do voluntary or involuntary disclosures depending upon the business domain. So regulated activities are great examples of that. The Bank Secrecy Act, your bank can't go and tell your neighbor, well, this is how much money Jer has, and this is what he spends his money on. That would be a crime in almost every regulated jurisdiction. Okay, so he enjoys confidentiality. But if he gets subpoenaed, the bank can reveal certain information. So what's cool about the concept is it's really interesting to talk on a protocol level, a cryptocurrency level. How do you do that? How do you link identity and privacy in the right way where you can ensure and preserve the rights of the minorities, of individuals, preserve people against dystopian governments, but at the same time be able to not deal with the dark sides of privacy? This is what we've been working on and thinking about for so long with Midnight. Another thing is, all privacy coins right now, all they really do is they keep the transaction private, the token private, the coin private. It's useful, but it's 2022, which means you have to have smart contracts. You have to have programmability. So how do you have a private smart contract? It's a very interesting question, and actually, there's people in this room who wrote a beautiful paper called Kachina that tries to answer that question. And there's people in this room who took some time to actually implement that paper and create their own virtual machine. And they use TypeScript as the programming language. Go figure. You can compile it and run it. Wow. So that's what we've been working on. And it's been a hell of a long road. 4 long years of deep R&D. Lots of team members, tons of papers. We published all of them. None of you paid any attention to them. It's really easy to keep a secret when you hide it in math. It's like, it's like an alien language. You're just like, here you go. It's like, okay, whatever. So, right now we're taking a look at DNA from Scorex, which is a project that we had a very long time ago with Alex Chirpinoy and Fabric. And we're taking that Midnight virtual machine and we're going to launch it as a sidechain of Cardano. And by we're, it means you are, because that's how sidechains are launched. And this is not just me talking. We actually have a demo tomorrow, a hackathon tomorrow, where people can actually play around with the Midnight virtual machine. People can write the code. They can actually see what a privacy application looks like. There's a lot of real cool stuff there. And what's really interesting about the way sidechains on Cardano work is that it's a partnership. It's magical in that respect. So this is a new blockchain. What does it need? It needs decentralization. It needs security. It needs infrastructure. It needs liquidity. It needs an ecosystem. Every new blockchain needs that. Cardano actually has it. It's on 200 exchanges. There's over 20 wallets that support Cardano. We have millions of people floating around doing interesting things. We have an incredible ecosystem filled with all these great developers and academics and wonderful people. So it'd be real cool if Cardano could give that to Midnight. What's Midnight going to give back to Cardano? Because partnerships are partnerships. Well, if Midnight's got a token, in this case we call it dust, then what happens is as the stateful operators maintain the Midnight ledger with those high performance, high throughput protocols, what they're going to do is they pay rewards back to the stateful operators and the ADA holders. So at some point when Midnight launches, you get dust and ADA instead of just eta. See? So everybody in Cardano land benefits from that partnership. Suddenly we're not as adversarial as we used to be, right? Now we're looking for every fucking partnership we can find. We're like, come to Cardano. Come on, Polkadot. It was a good run. Come on over. Come on to Cardano. There's a lot of great stuff you can do. And we'll take care of your blockchain for you. Real nice. It'll be great. We'll give you wallets, and oh, you can be a Cardano native asset, and oh, we made a room up for you. It's just so beautiful. And we'll get some of those stake rewards. You see? That's how we should be thinking when we think about cooperation and interoperability. And this is the dream of 4 years of hard work. And there's going to be some great presentations tomorrow about ACE. And we have a lot of cool stuff. I think there might even be a website at some point up. If not today, then soon. And there's all kinds of great stuff that's floating out here. And you guys are just going to be blown away by the amount of progress that we've been able to do. But the magic and power of this is we've been doing it with great ecosystems to stand on like Scorex and Fabric. We've been doing it out in the open through the peer-reviewed process. And now we get to do it with the Cardano community, which makes me really excited. As a side note, we didn't originally plan for it to be with the Cardano community because we thought that we'd be done with Cardano in 2020. And yeah, that's Charles talking. And we said to ourselves, oh, well, what's the next thing after that? I said, well, we'll work on Cardano still, but we really should do a proof-of-work cryptocurrency. So we actually did all this proof-of-work research with the NEPA POWs and useful proof-of-work and Minotaur and all these other cool things. And then we're like, fuck it, we'll just do it as a sidechain of Cardano. That makes a lot more sense. So we have all this great proof-of-work research that we've been able to do and think about. And what's really cool is when we think to the future of Cardano as we get past input endorsers, this never stops innovating. You see, we're almost done with the 3rd generation. We're about halfway through it. And once we get all these sidechains turned on, we've finalized the interoperability part. And then suddenly Cardano has privacy, computational privacy, the first of its kind to have a system like that. Beautiful. And we brought these large ecosystems in like Cosmos and Fabric and so forth. And yeah, it'll take some time, but we'll get there. And of course the Ethereum ecosystem, because we kind of have to. Take some time, but we'll get there. It's good to go. People support Windows. It's great. So we'll have all that. It'll be there. It'll be working great, right? But then we get to talk with those institutions and the D-reps and the Treasury and all these things about the 4th generation. It never stops. There's more to do. In fact, working on Midnight, we came up with multi-resource consensus. How do you go beyond proof of stake and start adding like proof of stake and proof of work and proof of X together? And build a protocol with many resources instead of one? How do you move into the post-quantum world and make all this stuff work on that? How do you move where you have dedicated sidechains that provide more resources to the system, like secure storage, for example? Because you need that as a dApp developer, so you can get off of Alchemy and Infura and these types of things. These are really hard questions, and that's what the 4th generation is about. The consequences of operating at a scale of millions to billions of people and resolving those fragilities that exist and ultimately making the system stronger, faster, better, cheaper. So I hope this elucidated to all of you the passion that we have. It's not been diminished one bit. Oftentimes when you step out of a stewardship role where you've spent many years working with many different people, a lot of which aren't even here anymore, and that makes me sad because I miss them. You reflect upon, well, what happens next? And what's so magical is not only is the project going to be stronger than ever, we still get to stay, but now we get to stay in a role where we're just one voice in a chorus instead of a broadcaster. People come to us and we'll be one of those institutions that does great research and has strong ideas, but it's not our ideas that matter anymore, it's yours. And what's so cool is we now get to build wonderful products like Midnight, where we can chase and solve real problems, going all throughout Africa and seeing the consequences of the lack of ACE, the violence, all the horrible things that have happened. We need to bring it back to the world. Seeing my own country, United States, it's starting to go in weird directions, and I get worried about it. We have to preserve our freedoms and our rights. And it's cool that we get to work on that and be part of that conversation with you as a partner. Looking at products like Lace, where not only is it going to be the best wallet, it's also going to be for everybody because it's going to go multi-chain. We talk about interoperability. It's important that we bring this to everyone. It's important that everybody in the space gets the quality and security that we're going to give the marketplace. And that means we're a partner. That's our role moving forward. Old wise men at the institutions, great. A voice, but not the only one. And building great, wonderful, magical products that allow you to imagine new things. We'll still propose audacious, grand roadmaps, and you guys can yell at us about them or get along with them. It's okay. We're still in Africa. We're still fighting hard. There's some amazing stuff with partners like Possession and others that we're working real hard on, and 2023 is going to be a really fun year for that. We're still doing that. We're still here in the community. We're still fighting with you guys. But now you get to fight with us shoulder to shoulder. So welcome to the age of Voltaire. It's going to be a magical one, and we're real excited about it. It's about time. Cheers.